The transport ship Nexus Herald docked with the massive alien trading station with barely a whisper. Inside the cargo bay, Lieutenant Sarah Chen adjusted her worn civilian clothes and checked her small travel bag one more time. She had to look the part of a simple human merchant, not a decorated combat veteran of the Terran Space Marines. The airlock hissed open, and Sarah stepped into a world of towering alien beings. The Karathi dominated the docking bay with their 8-foot frames and thick armored hide that looked like living stone. Their forearms moved with practiced efficiency as they processed incoming cargo. When they spoke, their voices rumbled like distant thunder. Human? One of the Karathi dock workers approached Sarah, his massive head tilting down to examine her. She barely reached his chest. "You are very small. Are you sick?" Sarah smiled politely, keeping her voice soft and unthreatening. "No, I'm healthy. Just here to trade some earth goods for rare minerals." The Karathi's laugh sounded like rocks grinding together. "Trade? You? Look at you, little creature. You can barely carry that tiny bag. How do you expect to handle heavy mineral containers?" Other aliens had begun to notice the commotion. A group of Vextai merchants, their blue reptilian features sharp and predatory, slithered closer on their powerful tails. Their leader, distinguished by elaborate golden scales around his neck, examined Sarah with obvious amusement. "A human trader," he hissed to his companions. "How adorable. Look at those soft features, that delicate bone structure. I've heard humans break easily." Sarah maintained her smile, though her jaw tightened slightly. She had spent 3 months preparing for this undercover mission. Earth's intelligence services needed someone inside the Karathi Vextai alliance to gather information about their military buildup near human space. Her commanding officers chose her precisely because she looked harmless. "I may not be strong like you," Sarah said, bowing slightly to the Vextai leader. "But humans make up for physical weakness with cunning and determination." This brought more laughter from the gathering crowd. A Karathi female approached, her movement surprisingly graceful for someone so large. "Cunning? Child, we Karathi have conquered 17 star systems through strength and honor. The Vextai have claimed 12 more through speed and ruthlessness. What have humans conquered?" Sarah pretended to think about this seriously. "Well, we've colonized about 40 systems, but mostly through negotiation and cooperation." The aliens exchanged glances that clearly said, "Pathetic." Sarah could see the exact reaction she needed forming in their minds. Humans were weak, diplomatic, afraid of real conflict. "Perfect. Cooperation," the Vextai leader spat. "The refuge of the powerless. On Vextai Prime, we teach our young that mercy is weakness. Only the strong deserve to survive among the stars." A new voice rumbled through the crowd. "And yet this weak human has traveled further from her home than most of us ever will." The speaker was a Karathi male, even larger than the others, with scars across his rocky hide that spoke of many battles. His insignia marked him as a military commander. Sarah recognized him from her briefings. General Thakmar, one of the Alliance's most respected warriors. "General," the dock worker said, obviously nervous. "We were just discussing trade with this human." Thakmar studied Sarah with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. A human trader traveling alone through Karathi space. Either very brave or very foolish. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This one was dangerous, not because of his size or strength, but because he was clearly thinking. She needed to be extra careful around him. "Probably foolish," she admitted with a self-deprecating laugh. "But earth goods bring good prices in this sector, and I need the credits." "What goods?" asked one of the Vextai. Sarah opened her bag and pulled out several items. Coffee beans, chocolate bars, a few bottles of whiskey, and some handmade jewelry. Luxury items mostly. Humans aren't known for making anything particularly useful, but we do make things that taste good or look pretty. The aliens examined her wares with interest. Coffee was becoming popular among several species, and human alcohol had a reputation for being both potent and flavorful. The jewelry was simple but elegant, showing human artistic sensibilities. "These might sell well," admitted the Vextai leader, his earlier hostility replaced by merchant instincts. "But can you afford station fees? Docking costs? The cheapest quarters here cost 50 credits per night." Sarah's face fell convincingly. 50? I was hoping for maybe 20. I don't have much margin in this trip." "Then perhaps," Thakmar said slowly, "you should consider alternative arrangements." The way he said it made Sarah's trained instincts scream warnings. but she kept her expression confused and innocent. Alternative arrangements? The general means, the Vextai leader explained with a cruel smile, that you could work off your debts. Humans are weak, but you're small enough to fit into maintenance shafts. Perfect for cleaning work. Sarah looked appropriately horrified. But I'm a trader, not a... surely we can work something out. Or, added the dock worker, you could always reconsider your career choice. Humans make decent servants if properly trained. The Karathi have a few in their embassy. They're quite obedient. The crowd of aliens found this hilarious. Sarah felt genuine anger building in her chest, but forced herself to look scared and overwhelmed instead. This was exactly the kind of intelligence she needed to gather. The casual talk of human servants, the assumption that her species was naturally subservient, the complete dismissal of human capabilities. I need to think about this, Sarah stammered. Maybe I could find cheaper accommodations somewhere else. Nonsense, Thokmar said, but his tone was not unkind. You will stay in military guest quarters. 20 credits per night, and you can repay the difference through translation work. We occasionally need someone who understands human languages. Sarah wanted to refuse, knowing it would put her closer to military personnel, but her cover demanded she accept gratefully. Thank you, General. You're very kind. As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah caught something in Thokmar's expression that worried her. The Karathi general was still watching her, still thinking. She had the uncomfortable feeling that he suspected something about her, though she couldn't imagine what. The Vextai leader slithered away, but not before offering one final comment. Enjoy your stay, little human. Try not to break anything important. Sarah nodded meekly and followed a Karathi escort toward the military section of the station, her mind already working on her real mission. She needed to locate the Alliance's Strategic Planning Center, identify key personnel, and discover their intentions toward human space. What she didn't know was that her real test was about to begin. The military quarters were surprisingly comfortable, though clearly designed for beings much larger than Sarah. The ceiling stretched 12 feet high, and she needed a step stool to reach the controls for the lights. Her escort, a young Karathi soldier named Braktor, seemed genuinely concerned about her ability to navigate the room. Are you certain you can manage? He asked, his rocky features creased with worry. The bed is designed for Karathi physiology. You might fall off during sleep cycle. Sarah tested the massive bed, which came up to her waist. I'll be fine. Thank you for your concern. Braktor hesitated at the door. Human Sarah, may I ask you something? Of course. Is it true that humans have no natural armor? No claws or fangs or poison? Sarah looked down at her soft hands, then back at Braktor's naturally armored hide and retractable claws. It's true. We're pretty defenseless physically. Then how do you survive? Your homeworld must be very peaceful. Sarah almost laughed. Earth was many things, but peaceful wasn't one of them. Humans had been warring with each other for millennia before they ever reached the stars. We use tools and work together. Groups of humans can accomplish things that individuals cannot. Like insect swarms? Braktor asked, apparently trying to understand. Something like that? Sarah agreed, though the comparison stung a little. After Braktor left, Sarah began her real work. She pulled out what appeared to be a simple tablet computer, but was actually sophisticated scanning equipment. The military section of the station would have the information she needed, but she had to be careful. Getting caught would mean more than just blown cover. It could mean war. The translation work Thokmar had mentioned began the next day. Sarah found herself in a communications center, helping decode intercepted human transmissions. Most were routine cargo manifests and civilian messages, exactly what she would have expected from commercial shipping lanes. This one puzzles me, said Veltar, the Vextai communications officer running the center. She was smaller than the males Sarah had met, but her scales were a brilliant emerald that spoke of high status. Human military encryption. Very simple, almost primitive. Sarah looked at the message, recognizing it immediately as a decoy transmission that Earth intelligence used to feed false information to anyone intercepting their communications. What does it say? Something about moving defensive units away from the Centauri sector. The humans seem to think someone is threatening their mining operations near Proxima. Sarah frowned as if trying to puzzle it out. That doesn't make sense. Why would anyone want our mining operations? They're not very efficient compared to Karathi or Vextai methods. Exactly, Veltar said, her forked tongue flicking out thoughtfully. unless the humans are more worried about military positioning than mining. These defensive units could be their entire fleet. The Vextai was drawing exactly the wrong conclusions, which meant the deception was working perfectly. Earth's real military strength was positioned near the Rigel sector, where intelligence suggested the aliens might strike first. Should I translate more of these? Sarah asked innocently. Yes. General Thokmar is very interested in human military communications. He believes humans are more dangerous than they appear. Sarah felt a chill. Dangerous, us? Veltar's laugh was like breaking glass. The general fought humans once, many cycles ago. A small trading dispute that escalated. He says humans fight differently than other species. How so? Most species fight until they win or until they're clearly beaten. Humans, he says, fight until they're dead. Even when victory is impossible, they keep fighting. He found it disturbing. Sarah filed this information away. Thokmar had combat experience against humans, which made him exponentially more dangerous than commanders who underestimated them. Over the following days, Sarah established a routine. Mornings translating intercepted communications, afternoons exploring the station under the guise of finding buyers for her trade goods, evenings in the common areas listening to alien conversations. The picture that emerged was troubling. The Karathi-Vextai alliance was definitely planning something involving human space, but the details remained frustratingly vague. References to the soft target and demonstration of strength suggested they saw humans as easy prey. On her fourth day, Sarah made a breakthrough. While translating communications, she discovered a reference to Operation Crushing Tide, a military operation scheduled to begin within the week. The target wasn't specified in the intercept, but context suggested it involved human colonies. Veltar, Sarah said carefully. This message mentions crushing tide. Is that some kind of natural phenomenon? The Vextai officer's scales shifted to a darker green, apparently a sign of excitement. Not natural, no. It's a military operation, very classified. She paused, then seemed to remember who she was talking to. Not that a human trader would understand such things. Of course not, Sarah agreed quickly. I was just curious about the translation. That evening, Sarah sat in the station's main recreation area, nursing a drink and listening to conversations around her. The common area was huge, built to accommodate multiple species with different sections for different atmospheric needs. The lighting was harsh by human standards, but she had grown used to it. A group of Karathi officers at a nearby table were discussing troop movements. Their voices, naturally deep and carrying, reached her easily despite the ambient noise. Sector 7 reports ready status, one was saying. All units in position. And the humans suspect nothing? Why would they? Look at their representative here. The officer gestured towards Sarah with obvious contempt. Weak, helpless, concerned only with profit. Their entire species prioritizes comfort over strength. Sarah felt her jaw clench but kept her expression neutral. She had trained for years to control her reactions, but the casual dismissal was getting harder to ignore. General Thokmar seems to think differently, another officer commented. The general sees threats everywhere. Yes, humans can be persistent, but persistence without strength is just stubbornness. Our intelligence reports show their military is scattered, poorly equipped, and completely unprepared for real warfare. Sarah almost choked on her drink. The human military was many things, but poorly equipped wasn't one of them. Either alien intelligence was terrible, or Earth was running a much better deception campaign than she had realized. A new voice joined the conversation. Thokmar himself. The general approached the table, and the other officers immediately straightened to attention. At ease, Thokmar rumbled. Continue your discussion. I'm interested in your assessment of human capabilities. The officers exchanged glances. Finally, one spoke up. Sir, with respect, humans appear to be a minor threat at best. Their technology is adequate but not exceptional. Their military doctrine emphasizes defense over offense. They seem more interested in trade and diplomacy than conquest. And you base this assessment on what evidence? Intelligence reports, sir. Intercepted communications. And observation of humans in person. The officer glanced at Sarah again. They're simply not a warrior species. Thokmar followed the officer's gaze to Sarah, who was pretending to be absorbed in her tablet while actually recording every word. Their eyes met for a moment, and Sarah felt that uncomfortable sensation again. the feeling that the general saw more than he should. Perhaps, Thokmar said slowly, appearances can be deceiving. He walked away, leaving the other officers confused. Sarah finished her drink and headed back to her quarters, her mind racing. She had the name of the operation and confirmation that it would begin soon. She had evidence of alien contempt for human capabilities and their complete underestimation of human military strength. But she also had the growing certainty that General Thokmar suspected something about her. Every interaction with him felt like a test, and she wasn't sure she was passing. As she prepared for sleep, Sarah checked her hidden communicator. Still no word from Earth Command. She was on her own, deep in enemy territory, with information that could save human lives if she could get it home. The question was whether she could complete her mission before Thokmar figured out who she really was. Sarah's 5th day on the station began with an emergency alarm that had her bolt upright in the oversized bed. The sound was unlike anything she had heard before, a deep pulsing tone that seemed to vibrate through the station's hull. Red lights flashed in patterns that hurt her eyes. Braktor appeared at her door within minutes, his rocky features tight with concern. "Human Sarah, you must come with me immediately." "What's happening?" Sarah asked, grabbing her bag and following him into the corridor. "Pirate attack. The station is under threat. All non-military personnel are being moved to secure areas." As they rushed through the corridors, Sarah saw the station's defenses coming online. Massive blast doors were sealing sections, and armed guards were taking positions at strategic points. The aliens moved with practiced efficiency, but she could sense underlying tension. "Pirates attack stations this large?" Sarah asked, having to jog to keep up with Braktor's longer stride. "These are not ordinary pirates. The Feltar Consortium. They're more like a military force that operates outside galactic law. Very dangerous." They reached a large cargo bay that had been converted into a temporary shelter. About 200 beings were already there, mostly civilians from various species. Sarah noticed she was the only human present, which drew stares and whispers. "Great," muttered a Vextai merchant. "As if we didn't have enough problems, now we have to protect a fragile human too." "She'll be the first to panic when the fighting starts," added a Karathi trader. "Humans have no warrior instincts." Sarah settled into a corner, keeping her expression appropriately worried while her mind raced. This was either very bad timing or an opportunity. Either way, it might give her the chance to observe the station's real military capabilities. The station shuddered under what felt like weapons fire. Several aliens cried out in alarm, but Sarah had felt similar impacts during space battles. These were probing shots, not a serious assault. Yet General Thokmar entered the cargo bay, his massive frame commanding immediate attention. "Citizens, the station is secure. Our defensive systems are more than adequate to repel this attack. However, the Feltar have demanded tribute and negotiations are ongoing." A Karathi civilian stood up. "Tribute?
We are Karathi.
We do not pay tribute to pirates. The consortium fields 3 heavy cruisers and multiple fighter squadrons," Thokmar replied calmly. "While we would ultimately prevail, the cost in lives and damage to the station would be considerable. Sometimes wisdom dictates negotiation over violence." Sarah found this interesting. The general was choosing diplomacy over force, despite having the stronger position. Either he was more cautious than his reputation suggested, or he was concerned about revealing the station's true defensive capabilities. Another impact shook the station, stronger this time. Sarah noticed that while most of the aliens looked nervous, a few seemed genuinely terrified. She recognized the signs of people who had never been in real combat before. "What if they attack anyway?" asked a young Vextai, her scales flickering between colors rapidly, apparently a stress response. "What if the negotiations fail?" "Then we fight," Thokmar said simply. "But until that moment comes, we wait." The general's eyes found Sarah in the crowd. "Human Sarah, you seem remarkably calm for someone facing her first pirate attack." Every alien in the bay turned to look at her. Sarah felt their collective gaze like a physical weight. "I suppose I'm too scared to panic properly," she said with a nervous laugh. "Sometimes shock makes people appear calm." "Indeed," Thokmar said, but his tone suggested he didn't entirely believe her explanation. Over the next hour, the situation deteriorated. The impacts came more frequently, and the station's return fire had begun in earnest. Through the cargo bay's small windows, Sarah could see the brilliant flashes of energy weapons and the Occasional explosion as a fighter was destroyed. The negotiations have failed, announced a Karathi communications officer who entered the bay. The Feltar are demanding full surrender of the station. General Thakmar has ordered all military personnel to battle stations. Panic began to spread through the civilian population. The young Vextai from earlier was now hyperventilating, her scales cycling through colors so rapidly they seemed to blur. A Karathi family huddled together, the parents trying to comfort their children with words Sarah didn't understand but tones she recognized. "We're all going to die," whispered an elderly alien of a species Sarah didn't recognize. The Feltar show no mercy to prisoners. Sarah watched the fear spread through the group and felt a familiar sensation, the same calm focus that had gotten her through dozens of combat situations. Her marine training was taking over, analyzing threats and opportunities automatically. The station shuddered under a massive impact that knocked several aliens to the floor. Emergency lighting kicked in as the main power fluctuated. In the distance, Sarah could hear the sound of metal tearing. "Hull. Breaches, they're boarding us," someone screamed. That's when Sarah heard something that made her blood run cold. The distinctive whine of Feltar energy weapons, echoing through the station's corridors. The pirates had broken through the defensive perimeter and were fighting their way inward. A new voice came over the communication system, speaking in heavily accented galactic standard. "Station inhabitants, you will surrender immediately or face total destruction. We are Feltar Consortium raiders, and this station now belongs to us. Any resistance will be met with extreme force." The voice continued. "All military personnel will report to designated surrender points immediately. Any weapons will be confiscated. Failure to comply will result in spacing of all civilians." Sarah saw the effect this announcement had on the refugees around her. The Feltar had a reputation for brutal efficiency. They would keep their promises, both to spare those who cooperated and to kill those who didn't. But surrender also meant execution for any military personnel, and Sarah technically qualified. More importantly, it meant the loss of all the intelligence she had gathered. Operation Crushing Tide would proceed, and human colonies would be caught completely unprepared. Thakmar's voice came over the communicator. "All Karathi military personnel, this is General Thakmar. We do not surrender to pirates. Fight with honor, die with honor. May your ancestors guide your weapons." The crowd in the cargo bay fell silent. Several Karathi stood straighter, pride overcoming fear. Even some of the Vextai seemed inspired by the general's words. But Sarah was doing calculations. The station's military complement was maybe 200 soldiers, scattered throughout a structure that could house 20,000. The Feltar Consortium was known for bringing overwhelming force to bear quickly. The defenders were brave, but they were also outnumbered and fighting on multiple fronts. The sound of weapons fire was getting closer. Through the cargo bay's entrance, Sarah could see sparks flying from damaged systems in the corridor beyond. The acrid smell of burned electronics and something worse, burned flesh, was beginning to filter through the air recycling system. A Karathi soldier burst through the cargo bay doors, his armor scorched and one arm hanging limply at his side. "General Thakmar is dead," he announced, gasping for breath. "The command center has fallen. We're cut off from the main defensive positions." The announcement hit the civilian crowd like a physical blow. Without Thakmar's leadership, organized resistance would collapse within minutes. The Feltar would have free run of the station. Sarah felt something cold and hard settle in her stomach. She had liked the general despite his suspicions about her. He had been an honorable warrior facing an impossible situation. "What do we do now?" asked the wounded soldier. Before anyone could answer, the lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in a hellish red glow. In the distance, Sarah could hear screaming and the sound of running feet. The Feltar were coming. Sarah looked around at the terrified faces surrounding her, beings who had never imagined they would die in a place like this, killed by pirates who viewed them as nothing more than obstacles to profit, children who would never see their homeworlds again, families torn apart by violence they couldn't understand or fight. And in that moment, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Terran Space Marines, made a decision that would change everything. She was done pretending to be weak. Sarah stood up slowly, her movement drawing confused looks from the panicking civilians. The wounded Karathi soldier was trying to raise someone on his communicator, but getting only static. The sound of approaching Feltar raiders grew louder, harsh voices shouting orders, the tramping of heavy boots, the occasional burst of weapons fire. "Everyone stay calm," Sarah said, her voice carrying in a way that made several aliens turn toward her instinctively. Calm? The young Vextai's scales were now flashing almost white with terror. "They're going to kill us all." "No," Sarah said with quiet certainty. "They're not." She moved to the wounded Karathi soldier who was still trying his communicator. "What's your name?" "Graktel," he answered, looking confused. "But human, this is no time for—" "Graktel, I need you to listen very carefully. Is there a security station near here?" "2 levels down, but the Feltar will have—" "Let me worry about the Feltar." "Is there an armory on this level?" Graktel stared at her. Something in Sarah's tone, in the way she was standing, was different from the nervous trader they had known. "Emergency weapon storage, section C7. But it's locked down and you don't have clearance. I'll handle the clearance." "How many Feltar raiders are we dealing with?" What?" "Human, Sarah. Why are you asking these questions?" Sarah knelt down to meet his eyes. "Because I'm not just a traitor, and we're not just going to sit here waiting to die." "How many raiders?" The soldier's mouth opened and closed several times. Finally, maybe 30 came through the breach point. "Could be more coming." 30, Sarah repeated, nodding. "Against 200 station personnel plus civilians. Those are actually pretty good odds if we do this right." A Karathi civilian overheard this exchange. "Good odds? Human. 30 Feltar raiders are worth 100 ordinary soldiers. They're killers, born and bred for violence." Sarah smiled, and something in that expression made several aliens step back involuntarily. "So am I." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the corridor outside. Heavy, coordinated military. Sarah recognized the sound of a combat unit moving in formation. They had maybe 2 minutes before the Feltar reached the cargo bay. "Everyone listen to me," Sarah announced to the entire group. "I know you think humans are weak. I've spent the last week letting you think exactly that. But right now that misconception might just save your lives." She turned to Graktel. "I need your sidearm. My weapon? But you're civilian, Graktel." Sarah's voice carried an unmistakable note of command. "Your sidearm. Now." The soldier found himself handing over his weapon before he consciously decided to do so. Sarah checked the charge level and firing settings with movements that spoke of long familiarity with military hardware. "Human, Sarah," ventured an elderly Karathi. "What are you doing?" "My job," Sarah replied. She moved to the cargo bay's main entrance and examined the door controls. The massive portal was designed to be blast-resistant, but it wasn't meant to keep out determined raiders. The footsteps were getting closer. Sarah could now hear individual voices, harsh, guttural Feltar speech that she understood better than she wanted to admit. They were dividing into teams, preparing to clear the area room by room. "Is there another way out of here?" Sarah asked. "Service tunnel," Graktel answered automatically. "But it only leads to the waste processing section." "Perfect. Everyone listen carefully. When I tell you to move, you head for that tunnel. Don't stop, don't look back, just run." "What about you?" asked the young Vextai. Sarah was studying the door controls, running calculations in her head. "I'm going to buy you time. 1 human against Feltar raiders?" The Karathi civilian from earlier shook his head. "Impossible. You'll be killed in seconds." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "But I'm going to make those seconds count." The sound of weapons fire erupted just outside the cargo bay. Short, controlled bursts that meant the raiders were clearing the last defensive positions between them and the civilians. Through the door, Sarah could hear Feltar voices coordinating their assault. She turned back to the group of refugees. "When you get to the waste processing section, keep going until you reach the emergency shelters in the station's core. Lock yourselves in and don't come out until you hear the all clear from station security." But human Sarah. Braktor had appeared from somewhere in the crowd. His young face creased with worry. "Tell them," Sarah said, looking directly at Graktel, "that Lieutenant Sarah Chen sends her regards." The Karathi soldier's eyes widened. "Lieutenant? You're military?" "Terran Space Marines," Sarah confirmed. "And right now I'm very unhappy with some pirates." The cargo bay door shuddered under a massive impact. "The Feltar were breaching. Move!" Sarah shouted. "Now!" The civilians scattered toward the service tunnel like startled birds. Sarah positioned herself behind a large cargo container that would provide decent cover and waited. The door exploded inward with a sound like thunder. Through the smoke and debris came the Feltar Raiders, 7-foot-tall humanoids with mottled gray skin and enough cybernetic implants to make them look more machine than organic. Their weapons were military-grade, their armor was top quality, and their movement spoke of professional training. The lead raider scanned the seemingly empty cargo bay and barked something in Feltar dialect. Two of his team moved to check the service tunnel while the others began searching for hidden civilians. That's when Sarah opened fire. Her first shot took the lead raider center mass, punching through his armor like it was made of paper. The Karathi sidearm was more powerful than she had expected, a pleasant surprise. The second shot dropped the raider heading for the service tunnel before he could call out a warning. The third shot missed as the remaining Feltar scattered for cover, but it served its purpose, forcing them to take her seriously. Single human. One of the raiders shouted in accented galactic standard. "Surrender now and we kill you quickly." Sarah's response was another perfectly placed shot that sent sparks flying from the raider's weapon, ruining it completely. The alien dove for better cover, cursing in multiple languages. "Counteroffer," Sarah called back. "You leave my station right now and I might let some of you live." The laughter that greeted this suggestion was exactly what she had expected. To the Feltar, the idea of a single human, especially a female human posing any real threat, was absurd, which was exactly why her next move caught them completely off guard. Instead of staying in cover and engaging in a firefight she couldn't win, Sarah went on the attack. She sprinted from her position, using cargo containers and support pillars for cover, closing the distance between herself and the raiders. The Feltar had been trained to fight conventional opponents who would seek cover and exchange fire from static positions. They weren't prepared for someone who treated the firefight like a three-dimensional puzzle to be solved through movement and aggression. Sarah's fourth shot took down a raider who had been trying to flank her position. Her fifth shot forced another into cover just as she reached his position and used the Karathi weapon's butt to cave in his skull. "What is she?" screamed one of the surviving raiders. Sarah smiled as she claimed the dead Feltar's superior weapon. "I'm human," she said simply, and put 3 rounds center mass into the alien who had asked the question. The remaining 2 raiders were now genuinely panicking. This wasn't how the encounter was supposed to go. Humans were supposed to be weak, frightened, easily dominated. They weren't supposed to fight like demons and laugh while doing it. One of them made the mistake of breaking cover to run for the exit. Sarah's new weapon dropped him before he made it 3 steps. The last raider, either braver or more desperate than his companions, charged her position with a vibro knife in hand. Sarah sidestepped his attack, grabbed his weapon arm and used his own momentum to drive the blade into his chest. As the raider fell, Sarah stood among the bodies and checked her ammunition. She had maybe half a charge left in the Feltar weapon, plus Grechtel's sidearm as backup. 7 down, 23 to go. Sarah smiled grimly and headed for the door. The real fight was just beginning. Sarah moved through the station's corridors like a ghost. The emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows that would have disoriented most beings. But her marine training had included extensive low-light combat exercises. If anything, the poor visibility worked to her advantage. She made her way toward Section C7, following the station's emergency route markers while listening for sounds of combat. The Feltar had spread throughout the station in small teams, which was tactically sound for controlling a large area, but created opportunities for someone operating alone. The first team she encountered was trying to breach a sealed security checkpoint. 3 raiders were using portable cutting tools on the blast door while a 4th kept watch. Standard procedure would have been to call for backup and establish a coordinated assault. Sarah shot the lookout first, then used the confusion to close distance and engage the others in close combat. The Feltar were strong and well-armed, but they were used to fighting opponents who would stay at range and exchange fire. Sarah's willingness to get close enough to use her hands as weapons consistently caught them off guard. Within 3 minutes, 4 more raiders were down, and Sarah had claimed additional ammunition and a set of Feltar combat armor that would fit her, with minor adjustments. She was strapping on the armor when she heard a familiar voice echoing from deeper in the station. "All remaining station personnel, this is General Thakmar. I am alive and coordinating resistance from Emergency Command Post 7. Any military personnel who can hear this, rally to my position." Sarah felt a surge of relief. The general's survival changed everything. He could coordinate the station's defenders while she operated independently, but first she needed to reach that armory. Section C7 was 2 levels down and halfway across the station. Sarah's route took her through areas where fierce fighting had already occurred. She passed the bodies of both station defenders and Feltar raiders, noting with professional interest how each side had fought. The Karathi had died hard, taking multiple hits before going down. Their natural armor and stubborn courage made them formidable opponents even when outgunned. The Vextai had used their speed and agility to good effect, but their lighter builds made them vulnerable to the raiders' heavy weapons. The Feltar casualties told a different story. Most had been killed by precise shots to weak points in their armor. Professional work by defenders who knew exactly what they were doing. Thokmar's forces were better trained than the raiders had expected. Sarah reached the armory to find it sealed by blast doors and defended by 2 very nervous Karathi guards. They raised their weapons as she approached, then stared in confusion at the sight of a human in Feltar armor. "Stand down," Sarah called in Galactic Standard. "I'm friendly." "Human, Sarah?" One of the guards lowered his weapon slightly. "What are you wearing?" "How did you—" "Long story. I need access to the armory." "Impossible. Only military personnel with level 7 clearance can—" Sarah pulled out her hidden communicator and activated a specific sequence. The device projected a holographic display showing her military identification. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Terran Space Marines Intelligence Division. Both guards stared at the display in shock. "Level 7 clearance?" Sarah asked. "Yes, ma'am," one of them stammered, moving to unlock the blast doors. The armory was a treasure trove of military hardware. Sarah selected a Karathi assault rifle, heavier than human weapons but more powerful, along with enough ammunition to outfit a small army. She also claimed several explosive charges and a portable shield generator. "What's the tactical situation?" she asked the guards. "Bad," one admitted. "The Feltar control most of the outer sections. We've lost contact with the defensive positions near the docking bays. General Thokmar has maybe 50 soldiers left under his direct command. And the civilians? Most reach the emergency shelters, but the Feltar are systematically breaching each section." "It's only a matter of time." Sarah nodded grimly. The raiders were following textbook procedure. Secure the area, eliminate resistance, then consolidate control. Very professional, very efficient, and very predictable, which meant she could disrupt their plans. "I need you to get a message to General Thokmar," Sarah told the guards. "Tell him that the human is implementing Strategy 7. "Strategy 7? But there is no—" "He'll understand. And tell him to be ready for a coordinated assault on the command center in exactly 30 minutes. Sarah left the confused guards behind and headed deeper into Feltar-controlled territory. Strategy 7 was a human military tactic that no alien species used. The deliberate sacrifice of tactical position to achieve strategic advantage. Most alien military doctrine emphasized holding ground and maintaining defensive lines. Humans were one of the few species willing to voluntarily give up secure positions if it meant achieving a better overall outcome. Her first target was the station's power distribution center. The Feltar had captured it early in the assault and were using it to control lighting and environmental systems throughout the station. But they had made a critical error. They were using it as a command post as well. Sarah approached the power center from above, using maintenance shafts that were too small for most species but perfectly sized for humans. Through the grating, she could see 8 raiders around various control stations, with their leader studying tactical displays. She planted 3 explosive charges at strategic points in the overhead structure, set for sequential detonation, then moved to an emergency access hatch that would put her behind the raiders' position. The first explosion knocked out the main lighting and sent several raiders scrambling for cover. The second brought down part of the ceiling, creating chaos and blocking the main exit. The third was Sarah's signal to attack. She dropped through the access hatch into the middle of the confused raiders and opened fire with the Karathi assault rifle. The weapon's heavy rounds punched through Feltar armor like it was tissue paper, but this time the raiders adapted more quickly. Their leader rallied them with sharp commands, and they began to coordinate their response. Sarah found herself pinned down behind a control console as energy bolts sizzled past her head. "Human," the raider leader called out in surprisingly good galactic standard. "You fight well for such a small creature. Surrender now and join us. The Feltar Consortium could use soldiers like you." Sarah's response was a grenade rolled across the floor toward their position. The explosion sent 2 more raiders down and gave her the opening she needed to move to better cover. "I'll take that as a no," the leader said, and Sarah could hear amusement in his voice. "Very well. Let's see how long you can keep this up." What followed was the most intense firefight of Sarah's career. The remaining raiders were clearly veterans, and they used every trick in the book to try to flush her out or pin her down. But Sarah had advantages they didn't expect. Her smaller size let her use cover they couldn't. Her human flexibility allowed her to shoot from positions that would be impossible for larger beings, and her willingness to take calculated risks kept them constantly off balance. The battle raged for 15 minutes before Sarah managed to eliminate the last of them. By the time the shooting stopped, the power distribution center was a wreck. But Sarah had achieved her objective. She now controlled the station's electrical systems. Her first act was to restore full lighting to the areas where Thokmar's forces were operating while leaving the sections under Feltar control in darkness. Her second was to seal several blast doors that would trap 2 raider teams in dead-end corridors. But the most important thing she did was activate the station's internal communication system. Her voice echoed through every speaker on the station, reaching defenders and raiders alike. "Attention all Feltar Consortium forces. This is Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Terran Space Marines. You have 15 minutes to return to your ships and leave this station. After that, I'm going to start hunting you down one by one." The response came quickly over the same system. Apparently the raiders had someone skilled enough to hack the communication controls. "Lieutenant Chen," a new voice said, speaking with the cultured tones of a Feltar commander. "I am Captain Vexkar, leader of this expedition. Your resistance has been impressive, but surely you realize you cannot defeat my entire force alone." Sarah smiled as she made final adjustments to the power systems. "Captain, you're absolutely right. I can't defeat your entire force alone." She activated her secondary plan, and blast doors throughout the station began cycling in a carefully orchestrated sequence. The loud rhythmic sound echoed through every corridor. But I'm not alone anymore. Through the station's sensors, which she now controlled, Sarah could see General Thokmar's forces emerging from their defensive positions. The Karathi general had understood her message perfectly. The human was creating an opportunity for a coordinated counterattack. And scattered throughout the station, individual defenders who had been hiding or cut off from their units began to move as well. They had heard Sarah's challenge to the raiders and seen her impossible victories. If one small human could take on the Feltar and win, then maybe they could too. Captain Vexkar's voice came over the communicator again, but this time there was uncertainty in his tone. "What have you done?" Sarah's response carried through every speaker on the station, reaching every defender and every raider. "I've reminded everyone that humans don't give up, and neither should they." The coordinated counterattack began exactly 15 minutes after Sarah's announcement. Through the station's security systems, she watched as General Thokmar's forces moved with precision through corridors she had cleared for them, while trapped Feltar teams found themselves cut off and surrounded. But Captain Vexkar was no ordinary raider. Within minutes of the counterattack beginning, he had rallied his scattered forces and begun a fighting withdrawal toward the docking bay where their ships waited. The Feltar weren't running, they were regrouping. Sarah realized with growing concern that Vexkar intended to make a stand at the docking bay, using their ship's weapons to threaten the station itself. If he couldn't hold the station, he would destroy it rather than admit defeat. She was studying tactical displays when her communicator crackled with General Thokmar's voice. "Lieutenant Chen, this is General Thokmar. Your assistance has been unexpected and extremely effective. Thank you, General. What's your assessment of the current situation?" "We have eliminated approximately half the raider force, but the survivors have consolidated around their ships. Captain Vexkar is threatening to target the station's life support systems with ship-mounted weapons if we attempt to assault his position." Sarah checked the schematics of the docking bay. It was a large open space with minimal cover and multiple defensive positions. A frontal assault would be costly, even with superior numbers. "General, I have an idea, but I'll need your forces to create a distraction." "What kind of distraction?" "Something loud and obvious that will draw their attention to the main approach." "Can you manage that?" "Easily. But Lieutenant, what are you planning?" Sarah was already moving toward the maintenance shafts that connected to the docking bay's upper levels. something they won't expect. What Sarah didn't tell the general was that her plan was almost certainly suicidal. The docking bay's upper maintenance areas were designed for automated systems, not human occupancy. The space was barely large enough for her to crawl through, filled with high-energy conduits that could kill her if she made a mistake, and would put her directly above the Feltar position, with no backup and no escape route, but it would also put her in the perfect position to end the threat once and for all. The crawl through the maintenance shaft took 20 minutes and left, Sarah's hands bloody from sharp metal edges. The air was thin and tasted of ozone from the electrical systems around her. Twice she had to stop and reroute around damaged sections where the station's hull had been breached. When she finally reached her destination, she was directly above the center of the docking bay. Through a maintenance grating, she could see the entire Feltar position laid out below her. Captain Vexkar had chosen his defensive position well. His 3 ships formed a triangle around the docking bay's central area, their weapons trained on the main entrances. Feltar Marines had established firing positions behind makeshift barricades, while technical teams worked frantically to repair battle damage to their vessels. Sarah counted 15 raiders still combat effective, plus ship crews that she estimated at another 20 beings. Against General Thokmar's remaining 50 soldiers, it should have been an easy victory for the station's defenders. But Vexkar wasn't planning to win a conventional battle. As Sarah watched, he activated a communication array and began broadcasting a message toward deep space, calling for reinforcements. If more Feltar ships arrived, the station would be doomed. Sarah had to end this quickly. She spent 10 minutes observing the raiders' patrol patterns and identifying their leader. Vexkar was easy to spot. A massive Feltar with elaborate cybernetic implants and armor that marked him as veteran of many battles. He was directing the defense from a position near the largest ship, surrounded by his best warriors. Sarah carefully removed 3 sections of the maintenance grating, creating an opening just large enough for her to fit through. The drop to the docking bay floor was 30 feet, survivable with the right technique, but she would have to land perfectly to avoid injury. She checked her weapons one final time. The Karathi assault rifle, 2 Feltar sidearms, 4 grenades, and a vibro knife she had claimed from a dead raider. Not much for an assault on 15 professional soldiers, but it would have to do. Sarah activated her communicator on a frequency she knew Thokmar was monitoring. General, begin your distraction in 60 seconds. And General, whatever happens next, make sure the civilian refugees know that not all humans are weak. Before Thokmar could respond, Sarah dropped through the opening. She fell in complete silence, controlling her descent to land behind a stack of cargo containers that blocked her from most of the raiders' sight lines. The impact drove the breath from her lungs and sent pain shooting through her legs, but nothing was broken. Sarah had perhaps 10 seconds before someone noticed her presence. She used them well. Her first grenade, thrown with the precision that came from years of training, landed directly in the center of the largest group of raiders. The explosion sent 3 of them down immediately and scattered the others. Her second grenade followed the first before the aliens could recover, this time targeting their communication equipment. Sparks and smoke filled the air as critical systems went offline. Intruder, someone screamed in Feltar dialect. Human in the docking bay. Sarah was already moving, using the cargo containers and support pillars for cover as energy bolts sizzled past her position. The Karathi assault rifle bucked in her hands as she put precise shots into targets of opportunity. But this time, she wasn't fighting confused raiders in narrow corridors. These were Vexkar's elite troops, fighting on ground they had chosen and prepared. They adapted quickly to her tactics, using coordinated fire to pin her down, while others maneuvered to flank her position. An energy bolt passed close enough to singe her hair. Another punched a smoking hole through the cargo container she was using for cover. Sarah realized with grim certainty that she was outgunned and outnumbered in a position with limited cover, which was exactly when General Thokmar's distraction began. The main entrance to the docking bay exploded inward as Karathi heavy weapons teams opened fire on the Feltar positions. The aliens' careful defensive plan collapsed as they found themselves under attack from multiple directions simultaneously. In the chaos that followed, Sarah did what she did best. She improvised. Instead of trying to fight her way to better cover, she went up. Using her smaller size and human agility, she climbed the support structure that held the docking bay's ceiling in place. From 20 feet above the action, She had clear shots at raiders who thought they were in secure positions. There, Captain Vexcar pointed directly at her. Kill the human! Every weapon in the docking bay turned toward Sarah's position. She rolled away from the support beam just as concentrated fire turned it into molten metal, swinging to another beam with movements that would have been impossible for larger aliens. What is she? Demanded one of the raiders. She fights like a Feltar berserker, answered another. Sarah dropped to a lower beam and put 3 rounds into the raider who had called her a berserker. I fight like a human, she called back, and eliminated 2 more raiders with carefully placed shots. The battle raged for another 10 minutes, with Sarah moving through the docking bay's upper reaches like some kind of deadly acrobat, while Thokmar's forces pressed their attack from ground level. The Feltar found themselves caught between 2 forces they couldn't effectively engage simultaneously. When Captain Vexcar finally realized his position was hopeless, only 6 of his raiders remained alive. He activated his personal communicator and broadcast on all frequencies. This is Captain Vexcar of the Feltar Consortium. I formally surrender to the human warrior. Sarah dropped from her perch to land in front of the massive Feltar captain. Even with his cybernetic enhancements, Vexcar looked smaller somehow, diminished by defeat. I have fought across 17 systems, he said, his voice carrying genuine respect. I have faced Karathi honor guards and Vextai assassins and the crystal warriors of Altair Prime. But I have never encountered anything like you. Sarah kept her weapon trained on him while Thokmar's soldiers secured the surviving raiders. What have you encountered, Captain? Vexcar's laugh was bitter. A human who fights like the universe owes her a personal debt. Tell me, Lieutenant Chen, do all humans fight as you do? Sarah considered the question seriously. When we have to? Yes, all of us. The Feltar captain stared at her for a long moment, then slowly removed his sidearm and placed it on the ground. Then the consortium has made a grave error in judgment regarding your species. Yes, Sarah agreed. You have. As Thokmar's soldiers led the prisoners away, Sarah looked around the docking bay. The cost had been high. Several of the general's best soldiers lay dead or wounded among the wreckage. But they had won. More importantly, every alien on the station had seen what a single human could accomplish when pushed to her limits. The careful intelligence gathering that had brought her here seemed almost irrelevant now. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the best way to send a message was to deliver it personally. 3 days after the battle, Sarah sat in what had once been General Thokmar's office, now serving as a temporary briefing room. Her civilian trader clothes had been replaced by a properly fitted Terran Space Marine uniform that Thokmar had somehow acquired through diplomatic channels. The illusion was over. Across from her, General Thokmar studied a datapad containing Sarah's after-action report. His rocky features showed no emotion, but Sarah had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated deep thought. Lieutenant Chen, he said finally, your report raises several interesting questions, such as, you claim that your combat performance during the Feltar assault represents typical human military capabilities. Sarah nodded. Standard training for any Marine, though I'll admit the circumstances were more challenging than usual. Standard training, Thokmar repeated. To move through maintenance shafts too small for most species. To fight effectively while outnumbered 8 to 1. To coordinate complex tactical maneuvers while operating completely alone. General, humans have been fighting impossible odds for thousands of years. We've learned to be creative. Thokmar set down the datapad and leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his massive weight. Lieutenant, for the past year, Karathi intelligence has been telling us that humans are a minor military threat. Weak, peace-loving, more interested in commerce than conquest. And now I am wondering how many other traders like you are currently operating in our space. Sarah kept her expression neutral. I couldn't say, General. Of course not. Thokmar's laugh rumbled like distant thunder. But perhaps you could comment on another matter. My staff has finished analyzing the intelligence data you were gathering during your stay here. Sarah felt a chill. I'm not sure what you mean. Operation Crushing Tide, the plan to demonstrate Karathi Vextai military superiority by attacking what we believe to be defenseless human colonies. Thokmar pulled up another display showing star charts and fleet positions. Based on what I witnessed during the Feltar assault, I suspect our intelligence regarding defenseless human colonies may be somewhat inaccurate. Sarah remained silent, but Thokmar continued. The 3 colonies we had selected for demonstration attacks, Proxima Station, New Geneva and Terra Verde, I assume they are not as lightly defended as our report suggested? General, I really cannot. Terra Verde, for instance. Our intelligence indicated a population of 50,000 civilians with minimal defensive capability. But if they have even a handful of individuals with your level of training... Sarah met his eyes directly. General, those 50,000 civilians include about 8,000 military veterans. Terra Verde was established as a retirement colony for former soldiers. Thokmar was quiet for a long time. 8,000 individuals with military training comparable to yours. Comparable or better. Many of them have combat experience I lack. And Proxima Station? Fleet training facility. 20,000 active duty personnel, plus the most advanced human military technology. New Geneva, Marine Corps headquarters for this sector. Home to the Terran 5th Battalion, also known as the Iron Devils. Thokmar stared at the star charts with what Sarah recognized as growing horror. We were planning to attack a fleet base, a Marine battalion, and a colony full of military veterans, yes, sir, with the expectation that they would surrender after minimal resistance. That seems to have been the plan. The general stood and walked to the office's main view screen, which showed the ongoing repairs to the station's hull. Feltar weapons had torn massive gashes in the superstructure, but the damage was being patched with remarkable efficiency. Lieutenant Chen, I need to ask you a hypothetical question. Go ahead. If Operation Crushing Tide had proceeded as planned, how many of my ships would have survived the encounter with your defenseless colonies? Sarah considered this seriously. Honestly? Maybe none. Attacking any one of those targets would have been costly. Attacking all 3 simultaneously would have been catastrophic. Even though we outnumber human forces in this region by approximately 4-1, General, humans don't fight the way other species do. We don't surrender when we're outnumbered. We don't retreat when the situation looks hopeless. And we definitely don't forgive attacks on our civilians. Thokmar turned back to face her. What do you mean? I mean that if you had attacked those colonies, humanity wouldn't have just defended them. We would have hunted down every ship, every base, every individual responsible for the attack. The war wouldn't have ended until the Karathi-Vextai alliance ceased to exist. The silence that followed this statement stretched for nearly a minute. You're not exaggerating, Thokmar said finally. No, sir, I'm not. The general returned to his desk and activated his communication system. Get me Admiral Korth on priority channel. Emergency authorization Thokmar 77. While they waited for the connection, Sarah asked, What happens now? Now, Lieutenant Chen. I prevent my people from making the worst mistake in our military history. The communication system chirped, and Thokmar straightened. Admiral Korth, this is General Thokmar. I am recommending immediate cancellation of Operation Crushing Tide. The voice that answered was harsh with surprise. General, you are scheduled to begin the operation in 48 hours. On what grounds are you recommending cancellation? On the grounds that our intelligence regarding human military capabilities appears to have been catastrophically inaccurate. Explain. Thokmar looked at Sarah, who nodded. Admiral, I have just concluded a detailed debriefing with a human military officer who was operating undercover on this station. The targets we selected for demonstration attacks are not defenseless colonies. They are heavily fortified military installations with significant defensive capabilities. Impossible. Our intelligence clearly shows, Admiral, this single human officer defeated 15 Feltar raiders in single combat. She coordinated the defense of this entire station while outnumbered 30-1. If this represents standard human military training, then we are not prepared for the consequences of attacking their territory. A long pause. Are you suggesting that one human represents a significant military threat? Admiral, I am suggesting that we have fundamentally misunderstood human military doctrine, capabilities, and psychology. I recommend immediate diplomatic contact to prevent what could become a disastrous conflict. Another pause, longer this time. General, I will consider your recommendation. Prepare a full report on your findings for immediate transmission to the High Command. The communication ended, and Thokmar slumped slightly in his chair. 60 years of military service, and I have never been more grateful to avoid a battle, Sarah smiled. For what it's worth, General, I think you made the right choice. Humans prefer peace when possible, but you are prepared for war when necessary. Always. Thakamar stood and extended one massive hand. Lieutenant Chen, it has been an honor to serve alongside you, however briefly. Sarah shook his hand, noting that he was careful not to use his full strength. The honor was mine, General. One final question, if I may. Your mission here, was it successful? Sarah considered this. She had gathered the intelligence Earth needed about alien military capabilities and intentions. She had prevented a potentially disastrous surprise attack on human colonies, and she had fundamentally altered how at least one major alien military leader viewed human capabilities. Yes, sir, I believe it was. As Sarah prepared to leave the station, aboard a human diplomatic vessel that had arrived to investigate reports of pirate activity, she found herself surrounded by the aliens she had protected during the Feltar assault. Braktor, Veltar, Graktel, and dozens of others had come to see her off. Human Sarah, Braktor said, his young voice serious. Will you tell others of your kind about us? About how we misjudged you? I'll tell them that when the situation was desperate, you fought bravely alongside us. That's what matters. Veltar approached, her emerald scales shimmering with emotion. We owe you our lives. How do humans typically prefer to be thanked? Sarah smiled. Just remember that appearances can be deceiving. The galaxy is full of people who seem weak but are actually strong, who seem simple but are actually complex. Try not to make assumptions. And if we encounter other humans, treat them with respect and they'll do the same for you. Try to hurt them. Sarah shrugged. Well, you've seen what happens then. As the transport ship pulled away from the station, Sarah looked back at the massive structure through the viewport. Somewhere in there, General Thakmar was probably writing reports that would fundamentally change how the Karathi-Vextai alliance viewed humanity. The young Vextai from the refugee shelter had been right. About one thing, appearances could indeed be deceiving. The Karathi and Vextai had looked at humans and seen weakness, frailty, creatures to be dominated or ignored. They had been looking at the wrong things. Sarah activated her personal communicator and began composing her mission report. Earth Command, this is Lieutenant Chen. Mission accomplished. The aliens no longer consider us weak, she paused. Thinking about everything that had happened, then added, in fact, I think we may have overcorrected slightly. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled slowly past as the transport ship set course for home. Behind them, word was already spreading through the alien alliance about the human warrior who had single-handedly changed the course of interstellar politics. But Sarah wasn't thinking about politics or diplomacy, or the broader implications of her actions. She was thinking about a cargo bay full of terrified civilians who had needed someone to protect them, and how sometimes the best way to keep peace was to be very, very good at war. The galaxy had learned something important about humanity. Now it remained to be seen what humanity would do with its newfound reputation. Sarah smiled and settled back in her seat. That, she reflected, was someone else's problem. She had done her job, and she had done it very, very well.